passive heating, cooling, all those things.
Go back to the reality of the campus for teaching purposes. I thought if you could separate it that way, so that they would be odd and contrast to have campus like that. You could have, in my opinion, you could have maybe one that was kind of retro, Greek, teaching about Greek, inspired building, and then maybe Elizabethan, do the chronology of buildings, and as they were going to keep them separated, where you would see, they would look odd and contrast each other.
Jefferson kind of did that at the University of Virginia,
Yeah.
but except for the Elizabethan.
Yeah. So something similar to, again, teaching that progression, but then also weird wacky idea that we thought about. We're going to adopt a house system. So they can have 4 buildings, which each house is representative of one of the different houses, but each with their own chronological theme that they fit in, and have a central main, administrative building or something like that.
So here's another blanket statement I would make. Any historical style can be made family-like to another one. The really difficult thing to do is to put any historical style building adjacent to a 20th century modernist building, right? So any building that is speaking to place and to local meaning, no matter the style, is categorically different from a building that's trying not to do that thing. So any of these buildings that we're in here, right? These are all buildings that are trying to be as if they could be anywhere in the world, right? We don't care what it takes to eat cool. And so it makes it really difficult to do something that has an historical root and works in the present with a language like this. Although I'm going to be helping schools that have 50s vintage school buildings, and I am determined to help them make those buildings beautiful somehow. We are going to find a way. So,
well, I think that's, in my opinion, I think that in some cases that's doable. I think some of the 20th century buildings that are brick that, sit up, they can be adorned and look, have some kind of regal presence, though, because there was that idea of a red schoolhouse.
it's the ones that are like
that are
flat.
level.
Yeah.
I didn't know what there was that trend for heating, or was it block glass, on the bottom, or something like that. And, I guess it was utility. Maybe that's more 60s and 70s. I think probably architecture.
Yeah.
That's all the problem.
On that topic, what would you say about, I feel like in the schools I've been part of campus development, one of the biggest errors I was ever part of was we were on a very landlocked campus, and the school ended up building a 1-story lower school building. And partially because it's just cheaper per square foot, right? I mean, ultimately, and it's a very lovely building. It's a very functional building. But to get out of the cost of elevators and just the extra square footage costs for going to a second floor, they made it single floor. Well, the school was so landlocked that ended up having massive implications for what the rest of the campus could be developed to create. And one of the, we found a way there to shoehorn in it's here in Texas, so a football soccer field, which is absolutely critical to schools of any size in Texas. But it absolutely could not have a track record. There just was not enough footprint on the campus remaining to do that. And so the whole athletic complex later was compromised in large measure because of this 1-story building was put. And even later, they're like, boy, if we had just set this 40 feet closer this direction, it would have changed all these possibilities. Anyway, I have thought since then, I honestly don't want to be part of building a 1-story school building structure ever again. In my context that I've seen, the land is worth so much that it just seems foolish to do that.
Increasingly, yeah.
But I didn't know what you thought on that topic.
No, I agree with you. Elevators are expensive, yes. But there's other costs when buildings get too long. right? The heating cooling costs get to be out of whack because you're trying to push cold air too long or heated air too far. And so there are other costs, right, that come back that that offset the cost of going up. We've had this conversation recently, and the builder said, no, it's not actually that much more expensive to go up 4 floors. That's the max.
Yes.
And of course, we don't do.
Most suburban areas have limits on how high. Here in Texas, most of the suburban cities, you can't build more than 3 stories anyway.
So that's a zoning rule, right?
Yes.
But there's rules of, economic rules, right? And of course, these days, we wouldn't build a 4-story school, but a 2-story school, or maybe a 3-story school. Those things can make sense economically in the right place, right? Especially with land values, especially if some of the land has value beyond being a school. If it can be commercial, if it can be real estate, then we have something else entirely. So maybe this is a nice way to, a nice segue into, Keith has let me photograph, and let me just return this before I forget to do so. And I'm just going to do some violence to this, going to make up some things. And because this is such an interesting idea, that could a school buy land large enough that it could be developed for other things beyond the school, and then that land have value that is bring back income for the school. And so I'm gonna make a mess of this, so don't be offended. I'm gonna say that there is a street here. Does yellow show okay? And I'm going to say that this street, because it's the longest street in the network, has some potential for retail. Okay, so while Keith wants to put the school there, I'm going to make another suggestion. So I'm going to suggest that, and you said this is 80 acres?
This is 85 acres.
85 acres. So what's the distance on the frontage as I've drawn it here? Yeah. Oh yeah, we can do that. Right. So that's a 100-yard football field?
Yes.
Or 120?
Well, 120. Right.
So that's 300. So that's a block length. Okay. Forgive me. I'm just going to do all kinds of violence to his beautiful plan. Okay. So I'm going to say there's another street here. So my first move is to build blocks, right? So we're going to say that's 120, so that's 320. So this is it's either one long block or it's 2 short blocks. So I'm going to make it 2 short blocks just for what we're doing. So forgive me. This is going to be painful, but I'm going to put a street right down the middle.
Sure.
Okay. And then let's say that there are things going on the other side. So let's just go ahead and this could be a mistake, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pretend that there are streets here. And even if in the future they connect with something now that they can't connect now. So already now I'm getting a block size that's about 300 or 400 feet long, which is what we would have actually in a commercial city. So the city of Portland has blocks that are real short, like this, 200 to 300 feet long. People in doing retail want short blocks because it gives shoppers more opportunities for more choices. And so short blocks kind of work. So maybe what happens then is, so then I would push the retail to the front. So I might do something like this. I might put the retail here. So retail, historically, retail is always 60 feet deep. In places where there's a lot of commercial development and those things are getting pressed, they can be less, they can be 50 feet, and maybe even less in really, really dense environments. But in usual sprawl,
Retail, what do you mean by retail?
I just mean any kind of shop.
So service-oriented businesses like doctor's offices and things would also fit in that category.
No, but we'll include that. So I wouldn't put doctor's offices here. I wouldn't put your wife's chiropractic on this intersection because this has too much potential for drive-by retail.
And now parking is going to be the issue. In Texas, I'm sure it's an issue. And people want to see where they're going to park. So either, and maybe I've made a mistake here. So let's go back and we'll erase a little bit if I can get this to work. Oh, yeah, it works great. So I'm going to move this back a little bit. And I'm going to move the retail back a little bit so that there is a single blade of parking in front. So people can't say that there's no place to park. There's parking here. And it could be that then the buildings stop and there's a parking lot internal to this. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're bringing the retail to the street so the passersby see the retail, but a lot of municipalities are saying, but we don't want to see the parking. Because parking is way too expensive. What we're learning nationally is that off-street parking is an expense that none of us understands we're paying for. And so municipalities are moving to where all the parking is on street. They're requiring no off-street parking. In the most progressive places, they're saying, okay, let's see what happens, how fast things will grow if we don't saddle developers with using part of their land for parking. And that terrifies some developers, and some developers say, oh my goodness, we see the potential there. So
Do they still do single blade or do they?
this is lots and lots of parking. In fact, what you could say is, let's just go one more step here. Let's say that I put this street a little bit in the wrong place. And let's say that we put the street here. And we build apartments here. And we build apartments here. So now we've got kind of we've got on one end, we've got apartments facing the street, and we've got retail facing the streets on the other two sides. And in the middle, what we've done is we've created a parking lot that could eventually, if needed, be a parking garage. Now, in lots of building environments, at $100 and more a square foot, we don't build parking garages unless we have to. But this is a place where if this grew well enough, the retail would demand additional parking. And then the block has been sized so that the internal surface parking could be converted into a garage. There's shapes for parking garages. Everything in the world changes. The one, it's the stars and it shapes of parking garages. Those are two things that are unmoved in the universe.
How well is this model of putting the apartments on top of the retail working? They did a lot of that in my area. I don't know if it's profitable or not, but
It has everything to do with the micro market. So if people are in a place where they can where they can choose not to live in a commercial environment, and that's more generally what people are expecting, then they'll do that and this won't work. If there are environments where there's such a housing shortage, or you've got people Blake's age who want to live in cities, and we've actually made a good street here, then these places become desirable, especially if we make them beautiful. So there's huge population pressure in cities, at least in a lot of American cities, and it's by the 20-somethings, right? Because they want the experience of living in a city, not in the suburbs, and so they'll live. Not that this is awful what I've drawn. I'm just imagining that I've made something beautiful, right, and not something terrible. But the other thing about this is that environments where there's a use of mixes, it's safer through the hours of the day. So if you have doors that are active around the clock all day, then environments where you have only retail will become safer, because retail after 8 o'clock is dead, right? There's nobody on that street. The streets become unsafe. So what you want is and this is the way environments are always done, you want places where there is activity around the clock. And this is partly why New York City is now safer than it used to be. It's the bars at 3 o'clock in the morning that keep the streets safe.
That's bizarre.
Even if you don't want them,
Yeah.
it's that activity on the street that makes New York safe. What's dangerous are streets where it's corporate office towers, everything closes at 5, the coffee shop's at 8, and then those are streets that nobody walks on in the evening. Right, and Chicago is this way, lots of cities are this way. So it can work. So let's say we've done this. Now we've got a whole bunch of retail, and I said this could be apartments, but this could also be, this would be a great place on the 2nd story or 1st story for doctor's offices, right? Because it's a destination that's off the main drag. It doesn't have the same, the square footage rents are going to be cheaper back here than they are. And so then I would push the school deeper into the lot. You could go one more, you know, if you wanted to go, maybe what I've drawn is, maybe this is where the offices are. It's a really glaring yellow, but okay. Maybe.
This lineup, I talked with a developer last week who was saying acquiring the land is the critical piece, and if you can use the ideological alignment of people who own the land, they'll sell it to you for a price or whatever else because they want to support the school, and you acquire more than you need for the school. What he was telling me is allow the commercial developers that you're working with to cherry pick the best positions on the campus, because that will induce them to want to be involved in the project. And you can leverage that toward the undergirding money to help you build your school.
You see, that's what we're doing. And of
Yeah,
course, the school is going to do fine at the north end of this lot. The
That's
school's
what
going to
he
do
was saying.
fine.
It's like the school can really function in a lot of different places where commercial entities, the access to streets and all that is much more critical.
I would also bring the senior housing. Let's just make this senior housing. Because seniors who are not incapacitated now have access to a city street. They can go shop and do things, right? So they're not isolated, right? I mean, this is what many of us don't want to happen at the end, right? We don't want to be isolated. And so I would bring the seniors forward, and then, you know, the school goes in the north part. And, you know, the school could have that entry that we've been seeing, right? It could be there. The school, it could have buildings that have some connection like this, could be. It could be,
This is based all on the assumption that the road on the south is the major road.
exactly, because I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, we could flip this, make
Yeah.
it north, we could flip it the other way, right? But you'd want to look, and the key is where there's retail now that's thriving. And it probably has to do with what, this sounds odd, it's the longest street.
Hmm.
So this is called connectivity. The street that's the longest is the one that's easiest to find. And the one that's easiest to find is where we all find it, and that's where we put the shops. So the thing that we've all said, all roads lead to Rome. We've actually done the network study of the streets in Europe, and they do lead to Rome.
Interesting.
It's this complex tree-like dendritic pattern that filters. And this is shown over and over and over again. What?
One of those trade paths? I mean,
Yeah, or pilgrimage paths or all kinds of things. But the point is that, and we've done this, there's a group in London that's called Space Syntax. They've used math to study street alignments. And so they used this formula to analyze the entire street network of the Greater London area, which is a massive area. In using the math, they determined what street would be the most findable streets of all streets in this massive network. This is math, by the way, right? So, and the street that it predicts would be the most findable is in fact the strongest shopping street in Western Europe, Great Oxford Street. So it absolutely works. They were asked, should we build a bridge across the Thames here? Will it be active? And Space Syntax said, yes, build the bridge. It ends in Trafalgar Square. It is active, it works. So putting the strongest street in any network is essentially the one that is the longest and it has the shortest angular changes. We can get on, we can find it most easily. So so if, of course, this is a context I'm completely making up, right? I'm assuming something. But if a project came to me like this, Keith, these are the kinds of things I would be looking for immediately is what is the real street grid? What is, where is the potential for retail, for office space? How could you build as little retail in the short term as possible? So I've got a client right now who's saying, our market will not support more than one story. We're going to build one-story shops. Fine. But he says, if we build this and we build plenty of residential, Chesterfield County will have the argument to take the feds to extend the interstate, and then the interstate will be extended because of the population service. With the interstate extended, then there will be an increased demand for retail, and then we might build up the retail, and we're planning blocks that could be in 20 years. They could build, if we still need parking garages in 20 years, then you could build a parking garage in the center of the in the block in a way that is uses the center of the block and keeps the streets active so that they are both attractive and safe. So that's kind of how we would approach this. Well, we just solved all the world's problems, didn't we? And if this is it's easier to put a wall around this, right? If it's needed, you secure that more easily than you can one that where the things are kind of in complex ways feathered in or fingered one into the other. So, or maybe it's maybe the school fields can be outside of the wall even, right? I mean, not that you're sacrificing the soccer players, but it does, the greatest part of the activity of the school. And this is, let's see, north is up, right? We've assumed north is up here. Yes, I see there's, right. So this is good because it means that the sun is here. We haven't talked much about this, but the sun is swinging through here. It means that this little green here in the middle is capturing the sun. Now, in this climate, maybe that's a bad thing. In Minneapolis or Minnesota, what you want to do is you want to create places. You want to create places with glass that capture the setting, the west and south sun, because those are the places where we will be attracted in winter, and where we can enjoy some winter sun. So that's critically important. Opposite here. Exactly.
From those spaces.
Right. And that's, so another thing, so you want to, in this climate, you don't want to have buildings that are oriented north-south, because that's creating the longest exposure to the west. And that's where the energy costs are. It's the mitigation of heat gain, summer heat gain. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize exposure to the west by having buildings that are elongated in the east-west direction. It means that you have more exposure to the south, but the sun is higher. You can build porches, and then the porches will shade both the building face, the southern building face, and create places for us in the shade as well. Are you following all that? It's real quick architecture speak.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
But yeah.
It's just a minor point on that, and it's really practical, not aesthetic. What we use on windows and things as a good resource for that heat mitigation. And
Well, so you're going to be most wanting to tint west-facing glass. So you would first of all want to minimize the number of windows facing west, like but we already have them, right? We're playing with the cards.
Better solution,
Well, I mean, you could
trees in front.
trees, yeah. Because they shed their leaves in the wintertime. You could build porches on the west side over time that become actually amenities, right? Because they're creating shade. So now they're doing two things. They're shading the building, and they're creating shade exterior, which become places for us to be as persons, right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Right. So you're looking for ways not to, the problem is keep the sun out, right? Look for an opportunity, right?
Well, it's great that you said it, because the hardiest tree here in Texas is a live oak, but you never lose the leaves. And so having a tree that drops during the winter makes sense, because it's letting the light in. Because then those spots that would be least desirable during the summer months here would be most desirable in the winter months, because that's where most of the light is. So if you're using trees to mitigate it that actually drop their leaves in winter, that just even a selection of which species of tree you're using, that's significant.
Right. So, I mean, that sounds
Red oak
like,
would be a lot better than a live oak.
that might be rocket science here, but think about historic cities. They are filled with street trees that are deciduous.
Yes.
One of the best trees, of course, is what the Europeans call the plane tree, which is related to our sycamore tree,
Mhm.
right? And those, at least the London plane tree is a really good urban tree, just great, does great in adverse circumstances, lots of pollution, it's okay. But those trees, they lose their leaves, right? And so all those places that need winter sun, now the trees are excusing themselves, they're retreating so that we can get that winter sun. It's enormously important part of the ecosystem that we're building in which we live, right? The ecosystem. And I just remind you this word eco or economic and environment, right? They all share these roots. Eco, the Greek is now in the room. It's oikos, right? It may have to do with management and home, and it's related to environment and economy. All those things are related in the Greek mind. And something we can learn again is how do we manage almost in a domestic way? How do we trim the sails for the wind that we have? I mean, this is the way that people thought about buildings in the past. You moved your furniture around and, oh, it's too hot in this room now. We'll move the furniture over here, right? We'll move the living room over here now in this climate. That was true before 1730s. There was no purpose-built room in a house. You were just building rooms, and then you moved around in your house with either retreating from or seeking the sun, right? That sounds crazy, I guess, in the present, but you're managing environmentally and economically how it is that you use a building to serve your community with its climate, with its trees, with its all those things, right? All these things are related if you're thinking broadly about it.
We can't plan for when our property set and design. I hear it's the big double glass doors and the glass on the back of the chapel / activity room right now, but it's they all face west. And part of the next building plan is that will be tiered amphitheater. The doors will open up and go straight out inside to the amphitheater.
That sounds great. I wish you could build like a double wide porch between the building with all the glass and the amphitheater.
That is very much a possibility. As a matter of fact, there was some questions as to why there isn't already an overhang over those double doors. Because the storms we up against. And
right, and the buildings and the doors and buildings like this have to swing out, so they're always a maintenance problem. So really, you should never have an unsheltered door, right? You're just asking for maintenance problems.
Terribly.
Yeah.
We had all kinds of problems. But it does, the sun speeds down on it.
So maybe you could think of, I said a double wide porch because the western sun, because it's low, and because it's more perpendicular to the glass, that's where the massive heat gain is. So on the southern side, the sun is higher, so it's a glancing blow on the glass. But on the west sun, it's low, it's hitting it perpendicularly. So you have to, in order to block it, you have to build deeper, or you have to build. Actually, columns can do this in a way because they block it laterally instead of vertically. And so, but a wide porch of kind of a sort, or low enough. I mean, so you would study the geometry of this. An architect would study the geometry of a porch that would protect that glass on 1 or 2 floors, whatever it is, and it turns it into an amenity so that you could be seated at the top of this porch, And it's also another place to sit and watch the performance in the theater, right? So it becomes just the best seats in a way.
Well, on the west too, because it's lower, you can plant trees to mitigate that.
That's right.
further From the building.
That's
So,
right.
Like on the perimeter, on the other side of where the amphitheater is going, you can have a little bit of room. You plant loblolly pines or something, go
That'd be great.
tall and grow well.
Can't do that either?
And we were limited space, that's our field, that's our practice field.
Yeah.
And then there are trees on the other side of the drive,
Yeah.
and every inch of that lot is
Yeah.
spoken for.
Yeah.
I wasn't here. It's
Well, see, this is the other thing. This is,
The vision, if you can see that amphitheater is surrounded by the two wings of the building, it's a U-shaped building with the U facing, or the top of the U or facing west.
yeah.
And the amphitheater in the middle between these two wings, you know.
I think it's got potential.
It does.
Just have to find the money, right?
It's not a bad idea, it's just that one, it does get horribly hot.
Yeah, and the energy cost to cool that.
Horrible AC problems.
Yeah.
That's the AC, or that's that sun.
Well, and it's not only that, it's the two projecting wings that are actually focusing it probably and bouncing more of it in.
Well,
So-
they're not, there's a
Okay.
phase 2 to phase 3, so, right now it's just that single building, so.
Can I ask you about this too, on heating and AC, particularly here in Texas? I mean, I've just experienced horror stories with large units and the damper systems and all that kind of thing. And so in most recent projects, I have demanded of architects to give me a design where every room has its own unit.
Well, that's possible now. I mean, there are Japanese companies that are making room-sized air conditioners.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine sought that in a new house because his family was becoming extremely sensitive to molds. And one of the harbors for molds are ducts, at least in their experience. There's more about this I want to learn. So they were purposely buying a new house that had wall-hung, ductless air conditioning in hopes that was going to reduce part of the problem in their family. So the Japanese have, and there's Mitsubishi and some other companies that are doing, and they're all over Europe. It's both good and bad,
Yeah,
but it is a way of
they're easier to maintain, like we have lower level maintenance guy that goes and cleans them if he doesn't have any HVAC experience and he can just rotate around and basically get to.
there you go.
But if we have the big units, we have to call people in.
Well, the other thing is that if you have a 50-ton unit go out, you're gonna shut down schools, everybody home. If it's the heat of summer in Texas, because it's not safe.
And I was saying to somebody
If you have
else,
a room that goes out, you can figure out a way to mitigate it for the day.
right?
Also helps with on our budgets. We just put in for 2 units per year in our budget, and that's
Yeah.
$10,000-$15,000.
Yeah.
Versus save it up for.
Yes.
300,000, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to control the big units in big buildings.
No one's ever happy with them.
So, but you should also be thinking about, if that big unit goes out, can we open the windows?
Yeah.
Can we open the windows? I mean, so many buildings now are the windows are inoperable, right? And we have no choices about that. And so.
Yeah.
I've kind of,
All right, so you don't think the individual unit approach is a bad idea?
you know what? I think Michael is telling you some real experience here that it has had benefits. And so,
You got the aesthetic, the big units on buildings, if you get on the roof.
Yeah.
These Mitsubishi units for us are kind of outside of the perimeter and that creates some issues like. Going for another building next to it.
Well, I've been working on, like this building has an exterior colonnade that goes around it.
yeah,
And there's a pitched roof that goes over it. And so in those spaces there that go between the windows on the second floor and the base of the first floor, that's where we're There's just units that go up and down there. There's a crawl space that you can get to for maintenance, but those units are all hidden, but they're feeding every room. There's no duct work. I mean,
And you're describing the kind of units
yeah,
that might
5 or
be.
6. Well, they're for each room. Now, these rooms are either typically 750 or 1,000 square feet each.
Right, which is kind of typical. Yeah.
We had
Yeah.
those wide.
Yeah.
That's wide. Yeah, it's more of a fan, but we do have these units for they only use during the, like, winter. Everything else is in open. And
Yeah.
For classroom for 750 to 1,000 square feet.
So a regular classroom 750, and then special use rooms like science labs and whatever, 8,000 or more.
That includes storage.
The design around that has storage in it, but it's also contingent upon numbers of students. So this school is designed around classrooms of 18 students.
Does that strike you as an odd number? It sounds about right to me.
It seems a little large, but.
I think some
maybe it's
private,
not- Maybe we're not used to that much.
well, some private schools are, for cost reasons, are building classrooms of 600 square feet. That's that we are seeing both. We might want, a school client might want 750 because it's worked well, but we're also seeing that when it comes to it, that the expense drives a shape more like 600. And then it's the larger ones, 1,000 or 1,200, that is a laboratory, right? Or a music room or something.
Yeah,
Right.
special use rooms, yeah.
But those are about, I mean, that's kind of the ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have smaller kids in Virginia.
That's what,
They're big in Texas.
is that why football doesn't work so well here?
You can put them in small.
We haven't talked about like COVID, but that there may be a push for bigger rooms with more spacing. Or more smaller rooms with fewer kids in it, which, yeah. One way or the other, if that maybe we're past that. But
So, the standard air change per hour in a classroom is 3 air changes per hour. The church that we attended in the Wheaton area, with a big room for maybe 800 people, they turned up the air changes per hour from 3 to 12.
Well, good gracious.
Well,
Did it feel like a wind tunnel?
it did not, but I do remember on one occasion that the candle on the communion table went out.
That's a serious.
And it is. And, there was some expense involved, and sadly, a lot of HVAC systems won't permit that kind of adjustment or change. But the point here is that it's air changes that you need to make in this kind of problem with airborne viruses. And so, yeah.
Physician said that, so she doing that air filtration. units.
That might work.
She donated them.
They might work, right? We don't know for sure.
Airplanes or jets are safer because they're circulating the air much more.
Exactly. And you feel it, the air is moving.
Yeah.
Right. So, fitness centers are the worst because the air changes it's not adequate, and we're breathing heavy. And so I haven't gone back to mine this year. It's just not safe. But if they could open the windows, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
It'd be fine. It'd be fine. So I would, you can pay a lot to change the HVAC system to increase the air changes per hour. But I wouldn't, do that along with having operable windows.
Yeah.
Nothing you can do technologically will do as well as opening the windows, because it's just, you can't bring enough air into a room as the gentle breezes of what's going by will do. Of course, it's not air conditioned, and we've made commitments about what we will endure, but there are great photos from the 1918 influenza of classes out of doors.
Yeah. Well, so that brings back this idea of security.
Yeah,
When
thanks for being
school
with us.
shootings really started, I hated the fact that codes meant that my youngest students had to be on the first floor. They weren't allowed to be on upper floors.
Because of stairs or?
Yeah, because their age, they just evacuate, at least here in Texas, that's what. So I think,
That makes sense.
third grade's really the earliest grade you're supposed to have them on the second floor or above. But those kids are also the most vulnerable, and the first story is where the penetration is going to be if you had a security attack. And so you'd rather put those kids further from the ingress and egress for their safety. But then when you talk about windows, I've had a lot of campuses where the windows didn't operate. I think that's fairly common.
Yeah.
And I wish they would, both for evacuation policy, but then you start having safety issues. I guess I wouldn't worry about it with high schoolers if the window's open on a third story, but if you had younger kids up there, the windows can open. Have you any insight on that as far as the safety?
Well, I think you can protect windows from people falling out. I mean, there's ways to do that.
Okay.
Only because of how high the windows are and how far they'll open, all kinds of things. I mean, that's not territory we haven't.
But you also have to look at it from a risk management position, the likelihood of a shooter versus a kindergartner falling down the steps and breaking his arm or his neck.
Yeah.
Because, if I'm in kindergarten through second grade, how slow they would have to go to go safely down 2 flights instead of a flight of stairs would be, that would take a half hour to get a class. The kindergartners.
No, that makes sense.
Some of the codes are weird. You have to have short toilets for them, but at home, none of them have short toilet. So.
Another way of thinking about the security problem was the Kansas City airport was built so that the maximum number of people could be closest to the gates. And so they had really shallow buildings where you could drive right up to the gate and just walk, go get on your airplane, go. And in the current climate, they've had to completely tear down this cast concrete.
Wow.
I mean, it's they faced this problem for 10 years and finally decided to take it on. They had to destroy all of this cast concrete air terminal to create the depth, the horizontal depth that by which we can secure the gates of. So they created the safety horizontally, not vertically. That might be another possibility that could be explored, right? I can just show you some things. There's a whole bunch of people here from Elijah House, a school in Richmond area, and they are growing. And so they, actually my firm is designing this multi-purpose gymnasium for them. And is it out of the ground? I don't know, but it's underway. And they needed some classroom spaces that eventually could become spaces related to the gym itself. And so this is a solution for them. Very modest building. They're they're still a young school and have modest capacities.
So you say that the classrooms can eventually become locker rooms, or?
Yes, or maybe they become related to athletics. Maybe they're smaller fitness rooms or something. But this is the Veritas Academy, and also in Richmond. And I wish I had it before and after, but you see this beautiful watercolor in the top left. They inherited a rather nice set of buildings, maybe seminary buildings around a green that was incomplete, but very nice buildings. And we have made the head building more formal and more, actually it's an interior that is now beautiful. And then they wanted to build a sports field. So you see this track and field. They actually didn't build it as it's shown in this diagram because there's a building that's in the way. It's kind of where the grandstands are in this watercolor. And they hope eventually to move this beautiful house, like the newspaper owner for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I mean, just a small palace.
Oh, yeah, I've been in that.
So they're gonna move the small palace and
That's
it,
where the stands are by the field.
yeah, let's see, can I get there without tripping over stuff? So the house that's shown here
Okay,
is presently here,
okay.
and they're gonna move it there.
Wow, that's a project, isn't it?
It is gonna be a project, but they seem to think that they can have a use for it in the long term, and it makes that they have, I mean, this is an amazing master plan that they're gonna be at for a long, long time. This gym on the right-hand side is not something they have, but these are things that we're drawing for them. So,
Yeah, they've had alcumin in that house in the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know the name of that, but I don't. Libraries, you know, we're, again, just remember the context here, we're showing Heritage Classical School, some library interiors, trying to give them a sense of,
That's lovely.
I mean, these are all, they're,
Those are samples, right? That's not a school, right?
right, these are samples of things, some, you know, that,
Wish list.
or, yes, I mean, the one on the bottom right here is pretty modest, you know, I think that's reachable. And then music rooms that could be flexible. I think the one on the bottom right looks like it could be less expensive, obviously, than the one on the left. I guess we're showing them we can do anything that they need. So just kinds of, these are diagrams, you know, they're just showing how an architect goes about kind of solving these problems, right? Of finding the what the program is, and these 4 green rooms here at in the bottom are houses, right? For their,
Oh,
yeah.
While you're on music rooms, do you have any pointers on acoustics? Just music, like a classroom or a practice space, or the orchestra, whatever.
You know what? There are, that is one of the great mysteries is acoustics. And so I won't even venture. There are guidelines for that.
My folks just said it could be a box, like an 8-foot ceiling, had to be pitched or at least 9.
Yeah, there is the need for music to move up and reflection. And so, but I can't say anything smart about this actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish I could. I've been around people who know this stuff. And so I just know, I see it's high science. Anyway, we talked about space, kind of classroom types, you know, do you want to be around tables? Do you want to have, as has been mentioned here, classrooms that are open to corridors? Do you want to have outdoor classrooms? Do you want to have, is it all learning from books, or are there things where people are making things? Are there places for kids to hang out and talk where they're not in classes? So this is a pretty small classroom. Outdoor classrooms. Do your teachers have offices? No, they don't. Silly idea. Maybe this is something you need to see. When you're at the beginning of a project, making changes is relatively inexpensive. The later you wait or discover, the more expensive. You see, it's a crossing, right?
And what's your option?
Right. So you want to think hard and do the work early on to think it through as best you can and make those decisions then, and hope that you can stick to them over the long term because you'll lessen the expense. The other thing that we say in our office is that there's always 3 things that are pushing against each other. It's cost, it's time, and what's the third? Materials. Right. And so you're always, you know, you can do something faster, but it's going to cost you more money. Right. And sometimes doing something fast, which might have met your initial intention, ends up looking like a mistake because you hurried a decision that you should have made more slowly, right? So being able to pace these decisions and acknowledging these things are always pressing against each other, I think is helpful. Whether you're doing a building or whether you're managing buildings, right? I mean, these are probably always the case.
You ever worked on rooms designed for Harkness tables and trying to make them a little more flexible?
What kind of tables? I don't know.
Harkness.
I don't know this.
We have the Socratic tables, large tables for Socratic discussions.
Oh.
It's named the guy who, what's the name of that? Yeah, Philip Exeter, one of the founders for Phillips Exeter Design.
I know that school. Yeah.
Of Harkness. All of their classes are taught from the Harkness method, which means students around a common table. But you have these huge tables and you have this huge table. So I didn't know if you'd done any work on that, trying to both have that capacity, but some flexibility. And like some Harkness tables have these leaves that come out where everybody turns when they're taking tests. So all the students are actually face to back.
Oh my
For the most
goodness.
part.
Oh,
So
what
you can
a,
look over each other's shoulder. That was a big.
oh,
And then I've been messing with the idea of these gentle trapezoidal desks that can be connected to make a Harkness table, but they can be split up into rows and columns if you needed that.
well, across, the studio next to mine is an interior design studio, and those people have access to a myriad of desk shapes. I mean, it's just amazing what, and so I'm sure that what you're describing is something that they know. Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, a lot of Harkness tables are oval shaped, but if you have too many on the side, then it interferes with those kids being able to look at one another during discussion. So circles actually work best, but then you need more of a square room instead of a rectangular room in most cases to make those work. The tables, the circumference are getting large if you have 18 students around a Harkness table. Anyway.
Well, I didn't know the name of it, but when I taught seminars for years, we always sat around a common table, although it was made of 6 or 8 smaller tables.
Right.
And they had the flexibility then of taking them apart and using them different ways. But, I,
Right.
It wasn't intended to be that big.
Right.
is it more like 12 or 7?
Yeah, it was 12.
Yeah.
The problem is then if you build those for, needing different size rooms for your humanities classes where you're doing that, then now Phillips Exeter's got money coming out of whatever the wazoo is, and so they don't have any trouble with that kind of thing, but most of us don't. We're not working with that kind of a budget, so you don't want class sizes of 12, which
Yeah.
is really expensive.
I think what you're doing is you're building a spectrum of classrooms that can work, that at every scale they can work. And for several uses, and there's the flexibility of, if a seminar 1 year gets larger than it does normally, then you can move to the room that will accommodate 16 or 18, when it's pressed to do that. But you're not making all of them large enough to do that. I think that's the mistake of making them uniform when and these things nest together nicely enough. I mean, you can make them so that they're square one is next to a rectangular one, and they have the same depth, right? But they have will accommodate different numbers of students. I think that's where I would start. And I would use flexible tables. And for testing, oh my goodness, I think I don't know. I'll let you. So I think I'd let students be in another room.
All the tests in the Harkness room is written in schemes that are
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
not objective.
You just want multiple choice.
which I'm sure you're doing anyway. So, well, it's getting to be the end of the day. I still have plenty of stuff to show you if you want to see some more. But I hope this has been productive, and we've talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of hard things. We've ranged from theology to how test takers are handled and HVAC, all kinds of stuff. Let me show. Let's just maybe we can make this your test. I'll show you a beautiful town. Oh, we did show them the cost.
Yeah.
Well, this is in Ohio. We found what the state predicts will be their per square foot costs for state school buildings. And it was terrifying, but we showed them, said, this is what it's going to cost.
Well, this is the hardest time to predict that, and what? Because since late 70s.
every month.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Everything's just berserk, and
this was before. This, you know, that these numbers came before, but
yeah.
yeah.
But it, yeah, you set out to build something last year and you waited because prices were really long.
Yeah, bet you're kicking yourself now, right?
There are a lot of people kicking themselves.
And how do you get out of this once you're in? Here we go. Well, I know I'm stretching you here, but we might as well do one more thing. Maybe it'll be fun. Engage you in a different way here. So this is a little town called Pienza, and Alberti might have worked with the builder of this place with a pope retiring. We thought that was a modern phenomenon. Apparently it was not. And so we've got a cluster of buildings which are interesting to look at. So here they all are. At the top left is the Palazzo Borgia, which is for a churchman. You see the top center is the top of the cathedral. At the bottom, at the top right is where the retiring pope would live, the Palazzo Piccolomini. At the bottom left is the city hall, and you see them all kind of clustered together at the bottom right. So whoa, that's not what I wanted to have out. So I've asked students which building is most important. How would you rank the relative importance of these buildings based on the architectural clues? Not because you think churches are more important, but why is it in the language that it is more important? So I won't, we're near the end of our time, so I'll just focus you on this one slide.
So the height reliefs.
So height is always, in most situations, we put our most important buildings higher. There are notable exceptions to that, but that is generally true, is that we put our most important buildings so that, because the dignity that we want for a building is actually amplified by it being higher. I mean, it's one of the things that is probably hardwired into us. So what else?
Ornamentation.
Yes, so yes, there is ornament. Now, what ornament do you see, Michael?
Well, Keith mentioned reliefs. Keith mentioned reliefs.
Reliefs? What?
Like the arch.
Yes.
The cornices.
Yes. Yes. So I think what you're saying is that the depth of the ornament is deeper on the more important buildings. And I think what you're doing is seeing that on the cathedral. Is that where you're seeing that?
Well, and the city hall building, those two. Really only have the colonnade sort of portion only on the city building. I don't know if there's a reason for the rectangular tower as opposed to is that a octagonal tower that's on the church?
Yeah, the upper part of it does look octagonal, and I can tell you some more. So the tower that you see on the city hall building with this kind of battlements pattern is actually a political affiliation. It's a sign for a political affiliation. So they're saying that this little republic is like other republics, maybe in their desire for independence from the Holy Roman Emperor. So that kind of thing is being stated here. What else do you see? And maybe you're seeing some of this stone as you're probably reading color here as being fineness. So yes, the stone here is kind of travertine marble. So it's the nicest material being used for that building. That's another clue, right? These other buildings are not. Some of these buildings are actually made of brick. Some of them are just made of lesser stone qualities. I guess I have to stand here and keep this going. So that is always a clue, right? So we reserve the better materials for the most important buildings. The arch on the City Hall building is a long-standing reference to markets. And the City Hall, the market in Pienza is actually behind this building. And the City Hall would often be a room in which the municipality was governed, and the biggest item for them to govern was the market. So we have a long-standing association of governance and markets, the same way that I guess we do in more larger scales now. But so the City Hall, the chamber, the council chamber is on the upper floor of the City Hall building. It has its tower that is signifying its stature as a would-be republic. And the arches are representing that it is related to the market function that for which it is responsible behind.
More square building with square windows that are multiple of the same, that signifying a lesser value, lesser status.
You're talking about the building at the top right?
Top right.
Yeah. No, actually, that what's called a crossed mullion window is another symbol. Actually, it's a papal symbol here, right? So it is a cross, and it's literally, it's intended to actually signify. I'm sorry, this keeps popping out this way. So yeah, that's not a lesser, although it is a residence. It is a residence for a retired pope. So there is ornament on that building, and but it's ornamented less than the cathedral and less than the City Hall. You can think about the City Hall, that 3-bay porch, as being almost like a 3-dimensional ornament, right? And so it is a building that's highly ornamented with freestanding columns. There's only 2 places where freestanding columns are located here. It's the freestanding column on the ground floor of the town hall, and it's actually 2 columns that support the wellhead. Just being a Christian community, kind of wonder, well, are we saying something really important about water, about living water? Could be. Be nice to think so. So I would, if I was doing this in a class, I would show them the 35 slides you're not seeing, and then they would write why what they see in the ornament that they judge. I think this is a logic exercise to represent which institution is more important than the others and why. And I guess it's easy enough to come up with the cathedral as being the most important building, but I've had a few students who would argue that it's the City Hall.
Yeah. Do both of those towers have bells in them?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question.
And see, and that's a clock in the top of the city building.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
And you got a steeple feature on top of the church, I guess, pointing to heaven.
Mhm.
But with the arches on both, it makes me think there's probably bells in both.
The other thing that we're not talking about is their relationship, the relationship of these buildings. So I don't know if you can make this out in the bottom, that little tiny diagram in the bottom right, but you see that the City Hall actually is lower, and it's facing across the piazza to the cathedral. So it's like the foot of this ensemble, and the cathedral is the head.
Okay.
And then the less important are the flanking buildings on the right and left. And we kind of see that because the street is running by in front of the City Hall, which creates the plaza is actually belongs to the church, right? So just the spatial arrangement, the relationship of the buildings one to the other, is also supporting our reading that the church is the important part in this ensemble of institutions that are facing each other.
What's the seal that's on the E, that ornament?
That is a papal symbol,
It is.
and it probably is both for the Piccolomini family and for the papacy itself.
Okay.
Yeah, I donated this, or I'm the progenitor of this. Yeah.
Did we talk about orientation towards the sun?
Yes, yes. Now that's a trick question, because in this, I can't see my north arrow here, and I'm trying to remember now. How does this work? I think that this church is not oriented. It's actually, its altar is to north. So it's, in this case, there wasn't the liturgical demand. And so it violates some rules. The sun then is keeping the plaza in front of the church in sun, illuminated. And actually you can follow the, I think you can follow, maybe I'm, no, I think what I'm saying to you is correct. So it's open to the sun, so it makes it an attractive place to be. The worst places in cities are buildings where there are plazas to the north of the building, right? Nobody wants to be there. Maybe in Texas and farther south, maybe, right? But in most places, you don't want to be on the shady north side of a building because it's cold. It's just not attractive, right? So you want to avoid creating places, or in this climate, you want to create shade in those places.
Yeah, here we put all our art rooms on the north side of the building so that they get northern.
Yes, and for good reason, right? Because you want the evenness of ambient light from the north, that doesn't become something that an artist is trying to overcome when this falls on their easel, right? So it's longstanding. If any of you like, if you look at 17th century Dutch interior paintings like Jan van Eyck, that kind of thing, or who am I thinking of? They're often set in interiors. We can actually map them. They had windows to the north because that's what they were doing. Yeah, that's still a good idea. It's really annoying to have direct sun fall on your desk when you're trying to paint or draw or something. Nice as it is. Well, it's 4:12. What else could we talk about that we shouldn't, that I've missed, or what lurking questions do we have here?
What would we expect as far as fees to work with a group like yours, depending on the project?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I think that range is those are secret numbers. I think that range is, I think,
It's negotiable, not.
I'm not sure I know is the true answer, but I think that the range is in 5 to 7 to 8% of construction cost.
Okay.
Some really internationally known firms, especially houses for really expensive, really rich clients, are getting 25%. Nobody in architecture firms don't make a lot of money because the time that is required to draw buildings is so enormous that it's a very, very high labor cost, but there is cost involved. And
So it's usually a percentage of projects, not a set fee.
yeah, so actually the way that we're doing this at present is that we will take off a kind of a chunk. So we'll say, so let's talk about, let's do, what is our fee for master planning? This is how many weeks it's going to take. This is how many people it's going to take. And we will agree on a fixed fee for that chunk. And then when that is established, when there's a master plan established and the school's got funding, then they're seeing their way further over the horizon. And so then we'll take on the next chunk. So we need to help your engineer get an approvable site plan through the regulatory agency. In that case, what we're doing is we're taking a conceptual master plan and we're working with a local civil engineer who knows their way around all those regulations. And we'll kind of take a back seat or a side seat to that so that we keep the engineers from losing what it is that the client wanted as they're trying to meet all the demands. And at the same time, they have the expertise, engineering expertise to get this through the county or city or whatever it is, right? And so then we're taking a kind of a side or parallel seat with them. And then as we're approaching the anticipation of an approved site plan, then we're negotiating with the school for the next phase, which is to design a building, right? And that building is probably going to take, it could take 12 to 14 months to design the building, partly because we have to go through the process with the school, getting it right. And then we have to go through all the regulatory agencies to make sure that it's right in terms of what all the rules are. And so it could take 12 to 14 months to get to that level, to that next stage. And then we can enter into another conversation with the school. Do you want us to assure in some way that the building is built the way that you intended it to be built? Or do you have a construction manager who will do that? And then we can be advisory in that relationship. So we're kind of taking this with these schools, kind of step by step, as we all know more, right? And as we customize what we can do for the school relative to the other resources they have, and who the expertise and what the expertise is that needs to be in the forefront.
Yeah.
And so all of that is being thought about. You know, we're talking about it now, but we're anticipating these conversations as we go forward so that we're staying close to what it is that's needed. Does that make sense?
Sounds like we should get more architects and civil engineers on our board, and less lawyers, not.
Yeah,
I think that's 100% true
You need both.
by my experience.
You need both. Yeah.
But I would add this from experience, we have.
Or at least, I'm just going to say, at least a builder and an engineer.
Yeah,
And sometimes architects, if they were not trained to do this kind of stuff, where they're interested in beauty, they can actually slow the process and be a wrong voice. And so you want to make sure that everybody is speaking the same language and has the same objective in mind to making a beautiful building. I just want to insert that. Does that make sense to
I
you?
appreciate it. I had 2 projects at the same school. One, we used a civil engineer who was more expensive, but all the people at the city knew him and liked him.
That counts a lot.
And then we had one that was somebody that the city didn't know, and frankly, would get a little persnickety. And we ended up paying a lot more.
Yes.
With the second, even though he charged lower rates, because we kept running in, because the city, if they decide they don't like something,
They-
it's just the delays. The
they
time
slow
to
walk
get
it.
a loan costs loads of money.
They slow walk it.
And
Exactly.
so I learned after that, like, I want the civil engineer that XYZ city knows and loves. And that's who I want to march through this process. And I don't care if he or she costs quite a bit more.
That's really good advice. Yeah. So as we were looking to recommend engineers to the school board, we were looking for engineers that are in the area that have worked for municipalities, that have built schools, that have worked with all the storm management, all the wetlands, all that stuff, right? So that we could be assured that they could facilitate the project and were known in those regulatory agencies. It's really, really important.
Yeah, we would actually ended up calling the development office and the city manager's office and said, which civil engineers have been the easiest for you to work with? And they would give us, in some cases, they gave us a short list, and I'm like, find one of these guys that be our person. Anyway, there was a massive difference between the two.
So, and if you want to make a place like we've been talking about, that is a school that's kind of walkable, right? That's framing, that buildings are making streets. Some municipalities are still opposed to that. And so if you get an engineer that actually knows how to do the kind of thing I've been showing you, and they're trying to do it in a municipality that doesn't want it, then that's another conflict. But if you're trying to do a walkable neighborhood school in a municipality that wants that, then you want the civil engineer that knows how to do this and gets this kind of product to the city in the way that they want it. So there's a lot to this. But well said, it is really important to get the right consulting engineer. Last questions for you all? Should the SCL do this next year? Okay. Thank you. I guess I you know, you're not going to be mean to me. You're going to say yes, but
Well, I think we need to continue to talk about the philosophy around facilities, and then I do think there's room for practical seminars on. We're going to start a project, here's your 7 basic steps or whatever it is, and help people walk through that process.
I wish that I could have done a session in the main conference on beauty and architecture,
Yeah.
make it theological, philosophical, all that kind of stuff, and do the 7 steps here, right?
Yeah.
And you know, because so much of that philosophical and theological stuff is of interest to me, I wanted to give you both, and so
Right.
that's kind of the way I've approached this. But I met Eric Cook today at lunch, so maybe we'll have that conversation going forward. I hope so. I'd love to do this again. And you know, certainly if I can be of assistance, or my firm can be of assistance to any of you or anybody that you know that is in this process, please reach out. We're learning how to work at a distance, and we will come in person when it's strategic and necessary for you. So I was just doing a project for an intentional Catholic community. They wanted to build a community where they could live together, and the arrangement of it would facilitate community, where they would see each other gardening or walking or strolling with their children or playing. And so we've done that, and we went to look at their property, and I'll go back. It's all designed now, and I'll go back at some point and make a presentation to this lay fraternity, Christian fraternity, Catholic fraternity, and maybe to other groups. Maybe in Northeast Ohio, when there is a purchase of land or an LOI, a letter of intent is put into place, then I'll go and look at that land, or maybe a team will from my office, and we'll evaluate or give some recommendations based on that land before we start drawing a master plan, a site plan for them. So another thing I should mention, one of the other ways of working that can be really, really productive is a work method called charrette. Has anybody encountered that word? Oh, good. So I won't bother you with the history of the word, but the way that it's being used in my community is that we bring a team to a place without any preconceived solutions for how the problem is to be solved. We listen to people present. We work there in a room where that community comes back and said, I don't know where you got that. That's not what I meant. No, that we mean this, right? And so it goes through multiple iterations of our accountability to the community in real time in that place. And what you find, and then sometimes there's a hybrid version where maybe we have people back in the office that are actually drawing things digitally, or we bring the whole process and sit in a big room and work for a week. But what you find is that you're getting the charrette environment. What it does is it compels all of the, it takes some preparation, because what you're doing is getting all the people who have a stake in this to speak in a short interval of time to one another. And so the amount of progress can be made toward a situation, especially in a complex situation, is really, really remarkable. The other byproduct of this is, if your community is, yeah, we know we need to build, if they witness this, does a lot towards building a shared vision for what the outcome is going to be, because they're seeing it. Like, they can come and look over the shoulders of people and see these things appearing, and then at the end there's a big presentation. It's like, yeah, we want that. Yeah, that's, and so it's a very powerful. It's so powerful that Michigan State University has set aside an institute where people are trained in this system, because it's a way of, for governmental agencies, of finding ways to be productive, or of solving really complex, controversial
It's a lot
problems.
like how we do accreditation for different agencies. You have a team of consultants, basically, non-paid, but they come to the school, look at the school's stated goals and plans, strategic initiatives, go observe what's going on the campus, how far off they are, what it would take to do that, and then the team of experts in the field write a report with all the stakeholders, have meetings. Then you're zeroing in on the key leaders and the board members, and say, producing a document that drives the conversation for those strategic initiatives.
That's an eloquent description. I've been involved in many assessments. I know exactly what you mean, and that's an apt description. It's one better than that, though, because in a charrette, you're not only helping the community diagnose what the problem is and assessing it, you're solving the problem. And I love this statement one of my friends makes: the drawing is the superpower. You're drawing the solution that can't be described. You're drawing it. And so that can happen in a charrette, where you have a visual solution to a complex problem that might have been described, but now we're seeing its solution, and we can see that there actually can be beauty. So keep that in mind. If you engage an architect, sometimes that will be offered as a way of accelerating the solution, especially in a time frame that's short, towards an answer. It's being used all over the country, really interesting ways. So keep an eye out for the idea of a charrette. Well, it's been a delight. Thank you. Some of you have hung with me all day. My goodness, I feel like you're my best friends now. You've heard more from me. These are more words than my wife has heard from me in a while. So thank you for your patience and interest in what I've done and what we've done together. And thanks for your engagement. And please let me know if I can be of any help. My pleasure.